Time for a classic matchup. Hello everybody, my name is Metas, and I think it's finally time I do this video. For nearly 20 plus years, a question has been pondered ever since the ending of Part 6, Stone Ocean. Who would win in a fight, Gold Experience Requiem or Made in Heaven? Why this question comes up a lot is for a number of reasons, but I think the biggest is, well, these two characters are, for one, the son of Dio versus the best friend of Dio, and two, the idea of a Requiem versus a Heaven stand. Which one is just stronger? Which idea is just better? As many would consider both of these characters achieving Dio's heaven in some manner or form. On top of that, there is a lot of fan art of this fight happening because people like to put Giorno at the ending of Part 6 for a lot of reasons, because it's just cool in general, but you know, what if Giorno actually did show up at the ending of Part 6 and fought Pucci with Gold Experience Requiem? What would have happened? This argument is almost 20 years old this month, as the date I'm recording this is April 3rd. So by the time this video is probably near a month old, this conversation has been going on for 20 years. This argument is older than me. Crazy. Also, if you want more Made in Heaven and Gold Experience content, I've already made some here on the channel beforehand, and I will be actually referencing both of those videos in this video a lot. So just FYI if you want context. Enough of the preamble, let's start this. So the first thing here I will be talking about is their abilities each, as we need context for their abilities and powers for later in the video. Starting off with the easiest one here would be Made in Heaven. Made in Heaven is a time accelerating stand, originally thought out by Dio himself and his heaven plan. Described in the Part 6 stand stats, quote, "It is impossible to explain this phenomenon in great detail, but Made in Heaven's stand ability utilizes the gravitational power of the Earth and the Moon, basically the whole universe, to increase the speed of time. No living organism is able to keep up. The only one who can move freely within it is Pucci, and essentially God himself." End quote. Shown in the ending of Part 6, Pucci is able to manipulate the entire universe's gravity to make time go forward. It is shown throughout the entire ending of that fight that he is able to make time move progressively faster and faster till the end of the universe, until it resets itself. This time manipulation is so good that even Jotaro's time stop is actually shortened by a few seconds because of the speeding up of time. Also, the speeding up of time, at least what is shown from Part 6, is not instantaneous. It takes some time before the universe will end. How long that time is, that's up for interpretation, but it is a gradual effect. But Pucci and Made in Heaven can freely choose where this acceleration stops and starts, as it's said at the very ending of Part 6 with his fight with Emporio. On top of that, any creature that lives into the new universe that Pucci has made thanks to the acceleration of time, because the old one had ended and the new one has started again, has the ability to see their fate. Note on that, only see. They can't like change their fate. It's like predetermined and they can't, you know, beat it or whatever. They just can see it now. But how fast is he? You know, that's kind of the answer I'm trying to get to here, so I'll explain that to you. Pretty fast. He's either, depending on the stand stats, either infinite speed on a mid ball, or depending on how you look at his ability and what is shown in the Part 6 manga, he could fit under the classification of an immeasurable speed type character, as he's able to time travel and, you know, reset the universe because of his speed and his manipulation of gravity of the universe, because time travel is immeasurable. We don't know how it works. Araki doesn't even go in depth on how the ability actually truly functions in the stand stats. So literally the author himself, to at least a finite degree, thinks he's immeasurable, unknowingly I might add. Here's what I would put the stats of the character, like his AP and stuff, but that's for later in the video, as there's an argument connected to it, so we'll save it for later. But what I will talk about now here is Pucci himself, because Pucci is no pushover, having almost the same exact stand experience Jotaro has, roughly being about 23 years, probably actually a bit longer. My man has a very large body count shown in Part 6 because how many stand discs he has, and has been shown multiple times to outsmart Jolene and friend group casually. His most known one is making Jotaro decide the universe or his daughter in a very big IQ play, realizing that he knows the Joestar's weaknesses. He is the type of villain to take every advantage possible to defeat his opponents, always being placed in a better position than the other side. The biggest example of this is Pucci in the Made in Heaven fight, trying to get closer and closer to Jotaro to finish him off, eventually using Jolene, his weakness, to defeat him. Pucci is not a pushover. Enter Gold Experience Requiem and Giorno Giovanna. A quote from its stand stats. A stand power that manifested when a stand was pierced with the arrow. Those who are struck by this power will even have their deaths reverted to 0 and thus continuously die an infinite number of times. Gold Experience Requiem's abilities are very few, but extremely interesting. Infinite deaths and return to 0. Return to 0 is a semi-passive ability to, well, return an action to 0. It is a form of causality manipulation, where the user can redirect any cause to any effect and undo anything or invert the relation cause/effect. In specific with GER, it procs because somebody is trying to attack Giorno or GER, like a physical action to harm him, and GER will cause the ability to activate, returning that attack/action back to 0. And to clarify with the stand stat statement about its ability, will usually refers to in JoJo's like your fighting spirit / your stand ability, but your will could also refer to your literal human will. Return to 0 is so powerful, King Crimson, a stand that can precog fate, was destined to beat Giorno in this fight, but thanks to Return to 0, that fate/truth never happened, allowing GR to prevent that fate that was going to happen to him and Giorno and beat King Crimson and Diavolo. Some people like to say thanks to this feat, GR is above fate. I would say kind of to that. It depends on the scenario, but yes, only being applicable to like a stand fight when he's being harmed. Would I say that is true? Return to 0 has to be one of the strongest abilities in JoJo, and definitely within the original universe. Like I said, reverting your attack/action/wills to 0, making you useless, allowing GR to body you into the ground like he did Diavolo. So up next is the infinite death loop. How does it work? Does it actually play any use here? Well, not really, because it's more like of an after effect of GR winning, but more or less you just get put into an infinite death loop that's never actually been explained very thoroughly at all, and we don't know how it starts or why it starts and why it just keeps on going forever. More or less it's just one giant trap card to keep you in a loop forever to die. And some people might say, well, no, it's an actual passive ability like Return to 0. It's not. There's not a lot of evidence to say that it actually does that without going into headcanon territory, and like no guidebook statements, which I will get into soon here, back that up. They only ever really just say it has the ability to put you in an infinite death loop. That's all. It's really vague. There's nothing that really backs up this ability. More or less how you can see it, at least in this video, it's just basically the win con effect after GR wins. You just like get put into a infinite death loop and GG's. But that's not all. GR also shows the abilities of its previous form, Gold Experience. I'll just shortly list them off, but they do have their powers and their uses. Number 1 being Life Giver. Giorno has the ability to bestow life into any object, making it into a small creature. Number 2, Damage Reflection. Since Gold Experience Requiem has Life Giver, it must also have Damage Reflection. Damage Reflection is what happens when somebody hits a small creature that Giorno has made, and the damage they put onto an animal gets automatically reflected on back to them. The next one would be Life Shot. Life Shot basically makes a person think really, really fast with actually not moving at all, as they have too much energy that their body can't keep up with them. Number 4 is Life Exhaustion. Giorno can hit an object, that being a life form, and make them go through their entire life cycle in a few moments. Basically a one-shot ability for life forms. Number 5, Self-Heal. Self-healing is pretty self-explanatory. Giorno basically makes his own body parts out of the nearby objects around him, and he self-heals. It's a pretty busted ability, and I would say arguably is his best, as he's able to recover from any injury. And that's mainly it for GR and its powers and abilities. Really, really strong. I will say that off the bat. Very, very powerful, very giant kit for him to experiment with. But for the more keen-eyed viewer, Gold Experience Requiem doesn't have a lot. He has like one really good statement that basically says he beats all other stand abilities, and that's really it, and his like abilities that were shown at the very end of part 5. Where a lot of his statements come from are guidebooks, and I will be going into that now. The guide statements I will be speaking about come from JoJo 6251, JoJo Agogo, and JoJo Veller. Quote, the stand evolved when an arrow pierced Gold Experience's body. It has the ultimate ability to change the opponent's movement and will to 0. Those struck by the Requiem are returned to 0, even to death, so they repeat death infinitely without ever reaching their true death. End quote. Quote, more destructive power. After being pierced by the arrow, Gold Experience abilities evolved, greatly increasing its power and speed. That attack also wounded King Crimson. Furthermore, it has an attack power that surpasses that of existing stands, so it could be said to be a perfect stand. End quote. Quote, the ability of Requiem selected by Arrow is impossible to compare with existing stand and measuring rods. Even Giorno, the main body, doesn't even know about the power that makes all willpower go away. The ultimate stand that returns everything to nothing. After destroying Polnareff's Requiem, Giorno, who had the arrow in his hand, brought his own gold experience and appeared. The power of the arrow is entirely under Giorno's control, the ability to return all actions and wills of the attacking opponent to nothing. Those who have been beaten by Requiem will return to nothing. Even if they die, they will continue to die many times. As a result, Diavolo, who believed in his precognition and attacked, would continue to experience death forever. End quote. So yeah, with these statements, it really just does back up that Gold Experience Requiem might be the strongest stand in the series, with statements like the perfect stand and the ultimate stand really being kind of the things that place it on the top, and really gassing up Return to Zero, as apparently it can just shut down you completely. And speaking about Giorno, while he's only been a stand user of this caliber for only a week, by the way, he is a prodigy with gold experience, as he figures out a bulk of his arsenal in that week. His biggest flex is his self-heal, and when it comes to his intelligence, he's literally done real-time trigonometry to beat Chocolata during his fight, leading to the 7-page Muda. The kid is a prodigy, but he doesn't have the years of experience like Poochie does. And one last thing I want to talk about, because I know some people will bring it up, because I did bring it up in my last Gold Experience Requiem video. Requiem energy / the ability to dominate living souls. What the hell does that mean? It is stated by Polnareff multiple times and the stand stats for Chariot Requiem that Requiem is an energy that dominates living souls. Another quote from Polnareff would be, "He who fully controls the arrow will control the world." If that arrow pierces a stand, I don't know how old that arrow is, but I'm beginning to understand what the maker of that arrow was thinking. There is something beyond stand powers, something that is beyond that already exists. End quote. Quote, "If this arrow were to be used by someone with the power, that person would be able to dominate the souls of all life. That was my discovery." End quote. There is narrative implications that having a Requiem or controlling Requiem energy means that, well, you basically run everything. You're that guy, basically. I only bring this up for later WinCon scenarios, but it's just something I'd like to point out for right now. And one more thing for the people that are wondering, how would time acceleration and Return to Zero affect each other, or who would win when these abilities clash? Well, I think it really depends on your interpretation of how the abilities work. If you think Return to Zero is some time-space manipulation type ability, there might be a chance that time acceleration manipulates that ability slightly, just how it slightly manipulated time stop. But if you don't think it's a time manipulation ability and it just can return something to zero because it just can for whatever reason, then it wouldn't affect it. But I think this might be one of those cases where we need a Rocky to answer it, so this is just up to your interpretation on how those abilities would clash, and I think we have to look at other outside factors other than those two abilities to determine a winner. So, the win scenarios. Yes, there are multiple win scenarios for both characters, as this argument is very long, it has lasted a very long time, and thanks to some characters not being extremely concrete and having a lot of statements and guides, there's a lot to interpret and a lot to discuss here. So, scenario 1, the ultimate stand. So this is one I think a lot of people are going to say the majority of the time when it comes to this debate. GR is the ultimate stand, therefore meaning all other stands are useless when fighting him. Multiple stand stat guides say either he's the ultimate stand or the perfect stand, and basically using either of those statements means that he just wins. There you go. Return to Zero just beats him, Life Shot just destroys him, GR just has too much, he just can't be beat. He outscales everybody. That's why I held off talking about stats for so long, because Gold Experience Requiem can either match them or just surpass them depending on the stand stat guide you use, meaning that Gold Experience Requiem can just match Made in Heaven's powers and abilities at the same level, if not above, and with stand stat statements saying that he's the ultimate stand, they of course would be above him, that being Made in Heaven. Technically even above that, more so, as GR would scale above characters like Tuss Act 4 and D4C Love Train, which are mentioned in the JoJo Veller, which is the latest stand stat guide that says he's the ultimate stand, FYI. So that is the most casual response to this debate, would be scenario 1, GR the ultimate stand. Easy difficulty to no difficulty for Gold Experience Requiem here. Scenario 2, the Requiem power. So this one isn't too much different from the first scenario, but you replace one thing with another thing. Replace the ultimate stand title with the Requiem power. You see, the ultimate stand title is pretty subjective and pretty inconsistent, as stands like Star Platinum, even after Part 5, always state that they have the strongest ability, or they're still the ultimate stand, or are one of the ultimate stands in the series in a few guidebooks with Gold Experience Requiem. So that whole ultimate stand title is really weird and kind of fishy, and really doesn't prove that's its physical capabilities. It could just be in terms of its actual like abilities and hacks that make it the ultimate stand. Plus, it's never stated it's the ultimate stand in series, only that it has an ability that beats all other abilities. So with that in mind, you just add Polnareff's Requiem take in the mix of all of that. Remember, the Requiem ability / Requiem energy is supposed to help a stand go beyond stand power, says Polnareff. So with that statement and its statement from its literal self, that being GR saying that it has an ability that beats all other abilities, it would win against GR because of that, because of the Requiem power up and because of the Requiem energy it has. The power to dominate living souls. Guess what Poochie is? A living soul. In this scenario, Made in Heaven might have the stat advantage now, but thanks to the Requiem energy statement here, I'd say GR would win with a pretty high to mid difficulty win con here, thanks to Return to Zero and the Requiem power. Scenario 3, GR just doesn't have that dog in him. So this one is presented by my homie Jobber that I'll be reading off. I did have this take, but he just wanted to go a little bit more in depth here, as this is his take on this whole scenario / debate. Quote, GR stats don't refer to its physical stats, but its ultimate ability returned to 0 stats. The ability of Requiem selected by an arrow is impossible to compare with existing stands measuring rods. Even Journal, the main body, doesn't know about the power that makes all willpower go away. The ultimate stand that returns everything to nothing. The ability to return all actions and wills of the attacking opponent to nothing. In terms of physical stats, something that people can get confused is the statement of GR's attack power surpassing that of all existing stands, but in reality, it's just a reference to Return to Zero's ability. Even in the same translation at the very end, it says, so it can be said to be a perfect stand, in reference to GR being an ultimate stand. Ultimate stands have ultimate abilities. Furthermore, what actually refers to GR's physical stats along with every other stand in JoJo's is destructive power. Though in normal stand stats they call it power, but in guides and in the series consistently refer to a stand's physical power as destructive power, as in JoJo A Go-Go's translation completely supports this idea as well, as the panel shows in this explanation that GR is hurting King Crimson with physical attacks / projectiles. So all this proves is that GR physically would just scaled relative or a little bit above Diavolo, considering that Diavolo could still react to GR. Granted, it was precog. Diavolo acknowledges that GR did get stronger and faster, but was still confident enough that he could at least be fast enough to skip time and precog him, which he does, and is still capable of harming Giorno if it was not for GR's interference. Basically meaning that GR just only scales to King Crimson and nobody else. Jobber and I think also in this scenario that Return to Zero is a time-space ability, meaning that Made in Heaven could affect that power. In this scenario, GR has every disadvantage possible against Made in Heaven. It doesn't have the stats, it doesn't have the ability advantage, it doesn't have the whole Requiem argument here, and it doesn't have the ultimate stand title backing it up either. On top of that, we also could say that its Return to Zero ability is not passive, as there's possibly a bits of evidence that's saying that GR needs to physically hit you before any of that shit can even proc, thanks to the ending fight in part 5. This scenario is like 5 or 6 scenarios all wrapped into one, but it's just one giant worst case scenario. You can really pick and choose your arguments within this scenario to actually prove that Made in Heaven wins in this fight. What you can really get from this scenario is this: GR only appeared in part 5 and scales above all stands pre-part 5 and during. So everything post is up to interpretation and really depends on the scaling / ideas that you get from the stand stat guides that really give you subjective / interpretive ideas on what the ultimate stand is, which in reality could mean something completely different from what you're thinking, because it is translated from Japanese to English, so there could be things that are lost in translation. So scenario 4 is a pretty fun one and is a reference back to my old Most Terrifying Stands video of Gold Experience Requiem. GR has a time limit. So this idea usually comes off the fact that Giorno was holding the Requiem arrow / the arrow at the end of part 5, implying that there is some type of disconnect from Gold Experience and the arrow now, leading to the idea that Gold Experience Requiem just doesn't exist anymore, implying there is some type of time limit with a Requiem power / if you take the arrow away from the stand, it will just revert back to its previous form, meaning that Made in Heaven just could reset the universe, as technically that's not trying to affect Giorno in any hostile way, as it's pretty independent of attacking so somebody. He can just do that passively without hurting him, and it wouldn't affect him. Meaning that the clock would run out on this so-called time limit on GR, reverting him back to gold experience, leading to a victory from Made in Heaven, because Made in Heaven will just glitch in one shot. So how likely is this scenario to actually happen? Probably jack all. The literal biggest debunk on this one is the fact that Chariot Requiem still existed after the arrow was taken away from him during his literal fight with Journo and crew. So there probably isn't a time limit whatsoever, but if for whatever reason you can somehow prove it, even though multiple characters state that Gold Experience Requiem now is like an evolution of Gold Experience, thank you Trish and Araki, yeah sure, Made in Heaven can actually just destroy Journo right here in this case, but I highly doubt it. And number 5, the narrative scenario. So this one's really simple to explain and isn't very complex. The Requiem power-up slash the whole concept of the arrows is eventually to achieve an ability like an almighty god. It is stated by Polnareff midway through part 5. Made in Heaven's idea is literally to achieve happiness. Poochie states that its power is not to destroy the entire Joestar bloodline or kill off the Jolene crew. Its literal power is just to make everybody happy through Dio's and Poochie's messed up mindset, but that's its entire purpose. The narratives of these power-ups are 1 to fight God or achieve a power of an almighty god, and 1 of achieving happiness kinda nearing God. That's it. That is literally it. To be honest, you can also tack this scenario onto scenario 2 and make a better argument for the both of them. So what scenario do I agree with is probably what a lot of you guys are wondering. Well, I probably have to agree with scenario 2 and 5, but together. So I did kind of spoil you guys a little bit. Why I say this is Requiems in part 5 are narratively built up to be just built different compared to other stands, a power of beyond stand powers. GR in verse is built up to be this, I don't know, messiah-like character in terms of JoJo powers. While Made in Heaven, on the other hand, is just built up to be, I'm just gonna reset the clock, bro, you good? In a funny way of putting it. Even Poochie states it. It's not to dispose of anybody. It's literally built to make people happy. On the flip side of that, GR is made to fight God, or be like God. I think just in verse it explains it well enough, and with those stand stat guide statements, they really do put on the pressure that once you fight a Requiem or fight that return to zero ability, you basically lose and are going to put into that infinite death scenario where you can't get out of it. But I will say this, with scenario 3, if you basically disprove a lot of the hard-hitting facts with GR and can prove that Made in Heaven actually has like significant advantage over him, yeah, Made in Heaven to win, I can definitely concede to that, but I just don't see it. Well, that's been my opinion on an argument that's lasted for about 20 years. Like, comment, share, subscribe, follow me on Twitter, stay hydrated. Keep nice in those comment sections, by the way. I don't want to see the chaos in there, but I slightly do because I am chaotic good. But anyway, goodbye.